Yo, what's up guys? Teacher Paul here, and today we have a coffee request. This comes from Susan, who says, "This is the history about the Swedish instrument that you have never seen before. This is the history of the Nyckelharpa, Scandi folk nerd." Okay, so if you want to check out the video that I'm going to react to, link is in the description. Go watch it and then come back to see my reaction. And let's go. Nyckelharpa.
Nyckelharpa is this.
Is that how it starts? Fading out? Okay.
Nyckelharpa is this amazing traditional Swedish instrument with strings that are played by a bow and shortened by tangents placed on keys that are activated by the other hand of the player.
That is crazy.
How
she pushes
did this
it up.
instrument come to exist? What is its history, its evolution, and its main times and names? This video is a summary of the history of the Nyckelharpa.
This is so cool. So it's kind of like a mix of a violin and a guitar.
The very first depiction we have of a Nyckelharpa-like instrument dates back to 1350 in a church on the island of Gotland in Sweden.
Gotland, shout out to Gotland,
This
Sweden.
has strings, has a bow, and apparently keys that are played by the other hand of the musician. It's not absolutely certain that the instrument depicted here is actually a Nyckelharpa, because the carvings in stone are not extremely clear and it's hard to see the details.
It looks like it.
After all, they're quite old. But it's usually
But it also looks like she's holding a, you know, like a dinosaur fossil head.
admitted that this is the first ever depiction of a Nyckelharpa. In the following centuries, so 15th and 16th centuries, we see more and more depictions of Nyckelharpas, especially in
It's in
churches
between a violin and
played by
piano.
angels.
Yeah, it makes more sense.
And these are found mostly in Sweden, but also in Denmark. But what is interesting is that early depictions of Nyckelharpas are not only found in Scandinavia. There is also one, for example, in Siena, in Italy, also a church painting from the beginning of the 15th century, and a bit later in Germany, in Hildesheim. In 1602, the Nyckelharpa is also very clearly depicted by Michael Praetorius from Germany in his book about different instruments from the period. So it seems that the Nyckelharpa has been found all across Europe during the late Middle Ages, but was more concentrated already from the start in Sweden. So what is the ancestor of the Nyckelharpa? Well, to answer to this question, we have to talk about three different families of instruments. First, the viels, which were really common during the same period as the Nyckelharpa starts to be depicted, and that also have a neck, a pear-shaped body, and strings that are played by a bow. What is missing, though, is the keyboard. And here we have two different answers which don't actually exclude each other but more work in a similar direction. The first family of instruments is the one that are also played with strings and a bow, but for which you use not the fleshy part of your fingers to press on the string, but your nails, and you press on the side of the string. And in this family you can find very different instruments, such as the Finnish juhikko, the Swedish talharpa or tagelharpa, and the Polish suka fiddle, amongst others. And the other family is the hurdy-gurdy family.
Hurdy-gurdy?
Because the resemblance between a Nyckelharpa keyboard and a...
Hurdy-gurdy is actually a thing. I know hurdy-gurdy from Catherine Tate when she imitates the Swedish lady. Have you seen Catherine Tate doing the language translator? Do you guys feel offended with that video or no? I find it funny. Hurdy-gurdy, dirty. I didn't know it was actually an instrument, hurdy-gurdy. But yeah, it's nice to find out.
Hurdy family. Because the resemblance between a Nyckelharpa keyboard and a hurdy-gurdy keyboard is very clear. Although they don't work according to the same logic of keyboard, the wooden tangents really look similar. So there is probably a link between the instruments that were played with the nails pressing from the side of the string and keyboards that were invented with just pieces of wood replacing the nails. So we could say that Nyckelharpa is what you get when you put together viels, nail-pushed strings instrument, and hurdy-gurdies in late medieval Europe.
I had no idea.
There are
Hurdy-gurdy.
only a
Catherine
few
Tate is so
instruments
smart.
left from these early period of Nyckelharpa history, and the most well-known one of them, which has been well studied, reconstructed many times, and is still played by many people in Sweden and abroad nowadays, is the Nyckelharpa from the city
Is
of
that a
Mora
rock
in
band?
Sweden. This instrument is quite of a debate, as it's written on it that it comes from 1526. However, experts who have studied the instrument think that it's probably more dating from 1680. This instrument is also quite of a question, because it looks more like the instrument depicted in the Praetorius Book of Instruments, and has a body shape that is very different from the two other existing instruments found in Scandinavia at the times, the
Interesting.
Nyckelharpa from Norway, and the SVERIGE from Finland.
Evolution of the
Now that we have
Nyckelharpa.
discussed the origins of the Nyckelharpa, we have to talk about its evolution, because if you see those early Nyckelharpas and the most modern ones, you see that there is still a big difference between them. The first
They're
question
still
we
wooden,
have
though.
to talk about is the resonance strings, because these are a very important feature of the Nyckelharpa today, but they are not found on the earlier models. The hypothesis that is the most commonly accepted is that during the late Renaissance and or early Baroque period, it was all the rage to have instruments with resonance strings. We can quote the viola d'amore, the baritone violin, even some hurdy-gurdies got resonance strings, and different types of fiddles as well. And it seems that this feature just suited the Nyckelharpa.
She mentioned fiddles, but someone in the chat also mentioned, Susan said that the Nyckelharpa is in between a violin and a guitar. Sorry, a violin and a piano. It has a metallic sound, not like the fiddle or the violin. So it's different. It has more of a metallic sound.
Harpa very well, so it was simply kept through the ages up until today. It is across the following centuries that we get several mentions of Nyckelharpas in texts. For example, the very well-known musician Bellman during the 18th century talks about Nyckelharpas being played in Stockholm. What is important to know about these different mentions of Nyckelharpas in texts is that Nyckelharpa is not always called Nyckelharpa. It has different names across the times and regions, and depending on who is talking. For example, we find Nyckelspel, Knaverharpa, Nyckeljiga, and many others. This is actually interesting to parallel even today, where in different languages you might have different names for Nyckelharpa. For example, in German Schlüsselfiedel, and in English Keyed Fiddle, although the word Nyckelharpa is in general the one that is the most used by all languages.
Nice, okay. First time I'm hearing about this.
In the 18th century and during the 19th century, we have a bit more clear information about Nyckelharpa. First, there is the fact that Nyckelharpa is not found anymore in other countries than Sweden. We don't exactly know when nor how it disappeared from the other countries that had earlier depictions or mentions of Nyckelharpas, but it did. And also, even in Sweden, Nyckelharpa was present in different regions, but in the 19th century it was found almost only in the region of Uppland. My personal hypothesis about this disappearance of Nyckelharpa from other regions than Uppland, that is also the hypothesis of many specialists but is not really backed by any scientific proof, at least not that I know of, is that other instruments have just taken over Nyckelharpa's territory, if you want. Instruments that were maybe easier to build than an instrument
and easier
with a
to
keyboard,
play maybe.
or that could play more different keys and more advanced techniques, or which sound was just more in fashion at a certain time. And I'm thinking especially about the family of the violin, and much later on, the accordion. Now let's talk about two different models of Nyckelharpa that were found in the 19th century in Uppland, and that are important to understand the modern evolution of the instrument. The first one, that is a bit older, is the kontrabasharpa. The name, in all possible languages except English pretty much, is quite confusing because it hints towards an instrument that would have a very low range, like a double bass. But it's not the case. It's just a name that is a bit confusing, and that means that there was a second melody string that was against the bass, kontrabass. This instrument was apparently quite popular and especially was made popular by one musician in particular, Byskalle, and he became very well known
Byskalle.
and is still today, and he made tunes popular and composed tunes for the Nyckelharpa as well, and these tunes are still played nowadays. During the 19th century, the other model that emerged was the silverbasharpa, and this name might be related to the fact that to give more sound to the gut strings, the lowest one was spun with silver thread. But this is a bit debated, and so another name for this instrument is tierpsharpa, which also gives us its origin. A bit later, at the turn of the 20th century, was invented a quite revolutionary instrument that was kind of a mix between the kontrabasharpa and the silverbasharpa. The kontrabasharpa med dubbellek, and this was, at least so far
double
that we
strings?
know, the first instrument with 2 rows of keys.
Ah, okay. 2 rows of keys.
And this leads us slowly but surely to the modern chromatic Nyckelharpa.
That's
in
4
the
rows.
1920s, one Nyckelharpa player was often playing in the Museum of Skansen in Stockholm and got a bit frustrated because he had difficulties to play with fiddlers who came from other regions and who could play in all possible keys. And this was because the existing Nyckelharpas were diatonic, they could only play in a very limited number of keys. This player was named August Bolin, and he started to work on a chromatic Nyckelharpa. And around 1929, he built the first official chromatic Nyckelharpa.
So he saw a difficulty. Oh, it's hard to play in different keys. And he actually invented a solution. That is so awesome. You know, to turn a difficulty into a solution. Susan says, in Sweden, we have so much folk music, and most of them are fiddles or Nyckelharpa. Wow, okay, so this is still well known today. You guys still listen to a lot of folk music. That is so cool to know that, you know, tradition is still alive.
This instrument had 3 rows of keys put in chromatic order, so able to play all half tones, 1 drone string, and 12 resonance strings. And this design is the one that is still the most in use nowadays. In the 1930s, Bolin was nice enough to give his plans of this chromatic Nyckelharpa to Erik Sahlström. And this last name is definitely one you should remember, because Erik Sahlström is considered as maybe the most well-known Nyckelharpa player ever, or the godfather of Nyckelharpa, or many other nicknames. And this is because he was a very good player of the instrument, he played a lot, he was recorded playing on TV and radio, which I can imagine had a lot of impact for how well known the Nyckelharpa got. He also composed many new tunes for this new instrument, which were more in fashion with the tastes of the time and had lots of chromatisms and lots of changes of harmonies that were not possible before. And he built instruments. And even more important than that, maybe, in the 1970s, he started to teach how to build this chromatic Nyckelharpa. One of his students was Hasse.
That is something that not a lot of people do. You know, teach, pass knowledge, give, you know, the secret formula to the upcoming generation, to the new generation. That is so cool. Susan says she plays the fiddle, and you can also call it a violin. I always want to play Nyckelharpa, but it's so expensive. Really, it is expensive? How much would one of these go for right now? Like, how much would you pay in a Nyckelharpa? And why is it so expensive? Is it because it's handcrafted? It's a unique instrument? All of the above? Like, or is it because of the silver?
How to build this chromatic Nyckelharpa. One of his students was Hasse Gille, who also became a very well-known Nyckelharpa player and builder. And now we are pretty much at the time of the folk revival, which hit Sweden like a storm as many other countries. And suddenly people, especially young generations, got interested in old traditions. They went to the countryside, they learned these old tunes and old traditions, and many got fascinated by the Nyckelharpa and learned to play and learned to build, and there was kind of a big explosion around the instrument. From there on, it's quite a very nice success story. In the 1990s, the Nyckelharpa was for the first time taught at the Royal Conservatory of Music of Stockholm, which you can imagine is a very high recognition for an instrument.
I also had a question. Do you guys learn instruments in school in Sweden? Like in high school, you must have music class, right? And do you learn instruments? Do you pick an instrument? I don't know, because you know every school has a different thing, but I can imagine that music class would be part of the curriculum. Not sure, just asking, because I don't know how the Swedish school system is. Like, what do you guys teach in school other than the basics, you know?
In 96, the Riksdag was also declaring the Nyckelharpa to be the Swedish national instrument.
Nice.
What is really interesting is that builders didn't stop at the chromatic 3-rows Nyckelharpa invented by August Bolin.
24,000 kroners, 40,000 kroners. How much is that in British pounds or in dollars? 2,400, 4,000, something like that. I don't know. I don't know what the currency is now. Is it like $1 is like 10 kroners or no? But it's around that 2,500 margin. Yeah, that is quite expensive. I don't know how it compares to like a violin though. I feel like a violin would be at the same price range.
But they were eager to explore more and experiment more and build new models all the time. And that's how in 96 the first octave harpa, so octave Nyckelharpa, was built by Lennart and Johan Hedin, because they wanted an instrument that would sound deeper in range, like a cello. And also many builders wanted to expand even more the range of the instrument and started adding a 4th row. Amongst them, Erik Olsson, Johan Hedin again,
making it more
and
complicated.
Tord Johansson, who had a very interesting construction. What is also to note is that the Nyckelharpa, which had been found in different countries but had survived only in Sweden, got well known abroad again. And this is mostly due to the folk revival, when people started to be interested in other cultures as well, and the globalization of the world, when people could get access to more and more things from other countries. And many people from other countries than Sweden discovered the Nyckelharpa and fell in love with it, because, I mean, it's amazing. I am one of these, and there are many more people nowadays in Europe, but also in the US and in many other countries around the globe who have fallen for the Nyckelharpa. Including builders who are still experimenting with Nyckelharpa, giving it different features, new technical possibilities, new shapes, and basically broadening the instrument to suit more and more musicians.
Here's an idea. What about an electric Nyckelharpa? Do you guys have those? I can imagine like a rock band with an electric Nyckelharpa, like a heavy metal band, electric Nyckelharpa. That would be so cool. I don't know. I think it would be so cool. You have music in school and you learn about different instruments. And if you want to do folk music study, you guys don't have electric Nyckelharpa? That would be so cool. I can imagine like you know, a heavy metal band having the first heavy metal band that adds a electric Nyckelharpa. I'm sure they're gonna make headlines because that's gonna be so cool. Somebody do it. Hi, Durga.
There are even today some electric Nyckelharpas. They're not...
What? She just mentioned it. We are in the same thought, you know. I'm predicting the next step.
More and more musicians. There are even today some electric Nyckelharpas. There are not many, but they exist. And we can only guess what the next inventions will be. So here's my take on the history of Nyckelharpa. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned a lot of things. I certainly did while I did all the research. Please like, subscribe, share, and consider supporting me on Patreon. Very happy Nyckelharpa Day to all of you. Play well, have fun, and I will see you in the next video. Hejdå!
That is so cool. Indeed. A very beautiful instrument. Guys, this was a very nice made video. Go check out her channel. She mentioned Patreon, so go support her on Patreon. And yeah, that was really nice. Also, if you want to support me on Patreon or on Buy Me Coffee, you can go there, be a member, and watch my reactions to shows, movies, and series. You know, we reacted to Emil, Jönssonligan, Cops, a lot of Swedish films, which you guys, not only one Jönssonligan, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So yeah, hope you enjoy that as well. So go check it out. Link is in the description as always. But that was really nice. I like the Nyckelharpa. We were hearing it throughout the whole video. It sounds so medieval. It sounds very folk. And I didn't know that Sweden like really still enjoyed folk music. I thought it was just in a tradition, like you know, tradition setting, like maybe midsummer, only like very specific events, but not something that was like a full genre that is still enjoyed. So that's pretty awesome. Thank you, Susan, for requesting this video. And you guys can request a video too through Buy Me Coffee if you want to show me something, or click over here to see more videos. Thank you for watching. Join us live on Twitch. Take care. Bye-bye.